Hey, everybody, welcome back. It's time again for another panel here at Comic Art Live, the Spring 2022 convention. John Suntress here from the Word Balloon podcast. I'm always happy to talk to Kelley Jones, the fantastic, iconic artist who has given us so many memorable images over the years and still killing it. It's going to be fun looking at some recent work of Kell's as well as some classic stuff, too. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you, too, John. Thank you. Nice words.
Well, and also we were just talking off the air about our love of audio drama.
Yes.
And I was about to tell you, and it kind of relates to your work being a Batman guy and everything. There currently Spotify has a Batman drama that they're playing for free there and stuff, and it's the top podcast,
Yeah.
which is great. And we were talking about how much we love old time radio. In fact, one of your images is I may as well pop it up. You did a fantastic, iconic shadow. Let me see if I can find it. There it is.
Oh, thank
you.
you.
Man. That was amazing. So, yeah, I mean, it's so clearly, and certainly, I'm sure you were a fan of what Kaluta was doing with Neil back in the day. But
I loved it. When I was a kid, one of the local radio stations ran on Sunday nights old radio shows. For whatever reason, probably no one was listening, so they had them and they cost nothing, And I got into it. My dad grew up with radio. And I think there was also, it had just started, was the CBS Radio Mystery Theater. And that's why they probably did it, because that was a big hit. And then they started playing like The Shadow and stuff like that and knocked me out.
I'm so with you. And I was a massive fan of the radio.
Well, you see it in your head, too. You totally see it in your head. It's actually nothing's better than that.
I so agree.
Unbelievable.
And like comics, the budget is potentially endless because it's all in your head.
All you need is a good writer
and great music and sound effect to create the mood.
Yeah,
you're so right, man. So no, I too am a massive fan of that stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, did you ever get the opportunity? Where is he? Oh, there's another great image though. Some Sandman stuff.
Yeah.
But here we've already, we're already getting some comments. Great, folks. We will definitely take any questions you have.
I'll answer everything.
And truly, this is a great opportunity. But yeah, did you ever get a chance to draw the shadow for any of the Dynamite or?
That's those covers were for them, and well, certainly I would have loved to. At that time, obviously doing a lot of other things. Comics is all timing. There's a lot of jobs I couldn't take because you're involved in something else. But the Shadow, I have a deep love for. I think I even said where you got it. He's still the most unsettling of heroes to me. Completely mysterious, very ambiguous. He's one of those, the less you know, the better he is. I don't want to know everything on how he does it. He just does it. And
or his backstory even. No, I agree.
No, I'm big on ambiguity in general. And it just works. It's like board games. I used to not to want to read the rules. We'll just start. And that's the same thing with the Shadow. It's like, I don't need to know all that. I just like what he does.
I am so with you. That's fantastic, man. This is very nice. Jordan Juanu from Hawaii. Big admirer of your art. You got me to look past the traditional art style of a character, drawing to see the more dynamic side. And certainly, Kel, what you did with Batman, starting with your just iconic take on the cowl. And man, we thought Marshall Rogers gave us sharp pointy ears. Man, you had him beat by another 6 inches.
Well, there's a method to the madness on that. When you come to Batman, at least when I did, you were in the very long shadow, pardon the pun, of the late Neil Adams.
Certainly, yes.
And you either, everyone, he was kind of the measuring stick on that. So when I came to Batman, Deadman, it was like, it wasn't out of a lack of respect. It was like, how do I stand out against this one of the 3, 4, 5 greatest who's ever done it, who will have ever done it? And so I came to it with more of a horror idea, because I would be horrified by him. I never did it like, what would I do if I was him? I don't care how his costume works or anything. I don't care. But I came to it as, what if I was just a man on the street? What if I was a regular citizen and I saw this guy, and I wouldn't see him in the daylight? He doesn't, to me, he doesn't do his business in the day. I know nothing about him. I just know he's there and he says, don't do it anymore. And you go, okay, he doesn't have to do anything. And so he became the shape and this force of nature. And you have to throw out a lot of technical rules if you're going to get an emotion like that,
Understood. Yes,
Um,
yeah.
and to his great credit, Neil took me aside a couple of times, but one in particular where he told me how much he admired that. And I told him, I said, you just can't do it, or you're an imitation or a lesser than
Yes.
or whatever. And he says, you solved the problem. He says, I get it. He says, I kind of came onto it and had to reinterpret. And he said, and it was one of those things where you hear a lot of things and they're all it's always very nice if someone likes it, but it's also okay if they don't like it. If someone doesn't, well, that's okay. Because when you're going to go into it and be, I switched from being thinking the technical stuff to the more auteur, what was in me. And that's just part of the price. So if someone says, oh, his ears are too long, I go, it's totally cool. I get that. But for me, he's a shape and a shadow. He's a thing that you kind of get a glimpse of. And that's how he works best for me. And I think those kind of ideas spread more ideas. It influenced how I drew him, the feel of the book, the whole thing. I was lucky to be with Denny O'Neil, who said, go further,
Wow. That's fantastic, man. And
Yeah.
again, that he gets it, and certainly that's the thing. He wanted the art to progress and
Yeah.
innovate and evolve beyond his style. Because
Yep.
you're right, man. I mean, I talked to him back in the day about guys who were great artists, but
Yeah.
certainly were following Denny's suit, like Don Newton and some of the
Yep.
others from that 70s, 80s period and stuff.
Yep.
And again, great stuff, but it really was all kind of same as Neil's stuff.
Yeah,
So
and you go into it. I think anything you go into where you're going to be artistic and give your best creatively, you also go into it with the idea that it's their right to fire you if they want, if they don't like it, if they're but I didn't go in there asking permission. I just did it, and I said, let the chips fall where they may. If I go out, if that's the end, whatever, people will know what, I'll went out on my own terms. So I'm extremely grateful to those editors and to those fans and to those readers who allowed that to happen and become part of that, because I never saw it in my life. I never in my wildest dreams did I think they're going to let me handle Batman.
well, thank God they did. And again,
I thank God too. Yes.
yeah, man. No, and we got some other great examples of your stuff to show, and I will pop them up as we're talking. But people are already asking about some. David says, "My Batman is huge ears, and I'll stick by it." Absolutely,
Well,
man.
thank you, David. No, it's always think of him. I always think of him as a silhouette rather than a figure you see. He's that thing in the alley, that thing in your room, that thing that you didn't know was there until he announces himself. And that really influences the drawing. And I always felt that it influenced the reader. I mean, when that would happen, once you allow that to kind of wash over you, I thought it kind of worked, because it did on me and other things,
Totally understand, man. Absolutely. I hear EC. Well, first of all, I want to give people a chance in order. Well, as we're talking about Batman, here's EC Harris, who has a great comment. I remember picking up the Batman Red Rain graphic novel back in college. Was blown away by the art. Love your work, Kelley. Also fun to have you have the Frankenstein Wrightson posted behind you. Let's take a look at that while we're talking. Boom. Yeah, I'll get out of the way. There we go. Oh, that's great, man. That's fantastic. Hilarious. All right, I'll pull back.
Yeah.
so you're not hurting your back or your neck. Mark says he enjoyed us meeting up both of us at Tony Moore's CincyCon years
Yes.
ago, and
Yeah.
that's when Kelley and I first met.
Yes. When was that? 2012, 2014, around there?
Something like, yeah, I
Yeah.
would say 14 or 15.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sadly, Bernie was supposed to be at one of those shows,
Yes.
and that's when he got sick.
Yes.
And yeah, it was a great loss. I love, and I want to bring it up, and you'll forgive me, Kel, because I should have labeled these better, but I know I'll find your fantastic tribute to Bernie. Well, first of all, there's a great Frankenstein rocking
Yeah.
image, which is outstanding. I love that. There's a good Red Rain, absolutely, and we can come back to these folks.
Okay.
You'll forgive me, but I really wanted to get to Kel's tribute to Bernie. Was it for a Bernie tribute book or whatever? There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that Wrightson did, and I think I mentioned it on that post, was he was a master of composition. And sometimes you forget that because you're just overwhelmed by the drawing, but he got you to look at what he wanted, and his incredible use of black and white, texturing everything to draw you right to that moment. He used to say that he could not do action, and I, fine, but there was a lot of action in how he directed, down to each panel of his work. It's not just a tour de force image here or there that he did. I don't know how much energy that took, but that's an enormous amount of energy to each panel have that happen.
And that's why it took so long for a lot of his books to come out, because he really took that time with each panel.
To this day, he had once said to me, well, I could only do Swamp Thing bi-monthly, but he was penciling and inking. And I go, how you did that in 2 months is stunning to me. That the level of effort in that. And, sadly, a lot of guys can't do monthly books anymore, much less a bi-monthly. They can do covers or a few issues here or there.
Sure.
But Bernie mastered drawing on the assembly line, and I think that lifted him to doing Frankenstein, his incredible Christopher Enterprise posters. I would recommend to anyone to go hunt that stuff down, and it's a clinic. You'll decorate your house with it. So
outstanding, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, EC says he has to jump, but he said, great to see you doing well. Thanks for all your work, which is great. And Mike says hello to both of us. He's a big fan of Kel's art. And yeah, I agree with Mr. Redjack here, 12. Mr. Redjack 12. You gave Batman that perfect amount of creepiness. That was more scary than his Rogues Gallery. Absolutely, man. That was the whole point of Batman. Everybody's there being these terrible monsters, and it's like, you think you're bad, check out the guy that's about to kick your ass.
And again, it comes from the ideas. I took it from just, if I was a regular citizen, right?
Yes.
I would have thought Batman was one of the Rogues Gallery, or one of the criminals. I don't know what he does. I don't know the details of his life. I just know he shows up. And he must be the worst because they light a lamp and project it saying he's loose or he's out.
Absolutely, more of a warning rather than please help us.
I always saw it as a warning.
And that's so great.
And he must have been the greatest because the public knew that the rest of them, Joker on down, all served time in Arkham, except Batman. And so if he's fighting him, it must be over turf. It must be over control. It must be something. So that was, again, that's where the ideas spread. It goes from this scary shape to how regular people, to how the bat signal works. And that was, and to me, that was my Gotham, was this dude that you didn't know anything about. That's why I didn't want to give away too much of him. I didn't, when they'd say, let's talk about how he does things or where it comes, I didn't want that. I said, he just does it. Okay. He just does it. And I used to tell him, I remember Denny says, hey, every time you're drawing the Batmobile, it's always different. And I said, yeah, because he has them all over the city.
That's awesome.
Right?
Sure.
He doesn't just have one and it comes out of the back. He's got them everywhere. And I said, it's whenever he needs it. And I used to make up devices all the time, whether Doug asked for them or not. I would just come up with devices because he has a utility belt and you never see him use the stuff. And I just thought, it's just, you got to take advantage of comic book. comic books in and of themselves, if they do something I disagree with now, is they try to be films when they should try to be more like comics. We're the only ones who do what we do. You come up with the more eccentric, the more interesting. If they're going to make a film out of it, well, the eccentric stuff is what knocks an audience out in a theater. But for us, that's our bread and butter, is to come up with those things. It's not, look, I'm a big fan. Realistic is great, but interesting is far better. And interesting is just this stuff. And then you can all get together, your friends, go, how did it work? How did he do this? I remember I made a man bat catcher. It wasn't asked for. It was just, I had him fighting so much, and I just had this little device, and it makes a web, and it shoots out and grabs him and whatever. And I just threw that in, and they loved that. They thought that was great. And I went, well, it's different, it's just, and of course he'd have a man bat catcher. Man bat might show up on, I don't know, who the hell knows. Probably realistically, you'd have to have Santa Claus's sack full of stuff if he goes out to fight.
Absolutely.
But to me, it all fits in that little belt, and
God, I'm sure you remember too those Treasury Edition reprint comics, and they'd have the interstitial stuff between stories, and you got a full diagram of Batman's utility belt, and it was the capsule utility belt, not the pouches. And it's he's got a mini saw, he's got a rope.
That stuff, and that kind of stuff I loved. It just because it wasn't closed, it was open-ended. There could be more and more and more. You could do that every Treasury Edition. I love that kind of stuff. One of my favorite things I ever did was when they used to have the Warner Corner stores. I did do a diagram of the Batcave, and I just threw in all this stuff, and I was doing all that, and they let me do it.
That's great.
But it was because Denny used to love that, what he used to say, this frenetic, bizarre imagination, and you just go. And he says, and the fact you just put him in there, he says, if I'm the editor for all these years and I still don't know what's going to happen, that's a good sign. He was very supportive, and I miss him to this day. But I owe him a lot. Doug Moench a lot, who used to never say, "What are you doing?" He just said, "Keep doing it."
Outstanding. That's so great to hear, man. Yeah. No, you guys were an incredible team.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And he was one of those guys who understood comics, and I didn't. I just loved comics. I didn't understand. I still don't really. I just know what I love. And Doug understood it. Doug understood the tempos and the meter and the all the nuts and bolts. And he never used to try to hold me back in that. He would just say, if ever you're going to do this stuff, just try to keep it in that arena. And meaning, if he's going to have all these different Batmobiles, make sure they still have all the intrinsic coolness of what a Batmobile should be. But they just encouraged it. They just said, go further. And then you don't think you're doing anything. I didn't think I was doing anything particularly odd. I just thought that's, what you do. I was thinking I still thought of Gotham in the 40s, and I knew I couldn't do that. So what I did was try to make it more anachronistic. There's a computer next to a hook and ladder phone. No one questions it. It just is. There's steam engine trains next to, Concorde jets. It's the way Gotham rolled. And that kind of thing, just makes more ideas happen. It's exciting.
And it comes through on the paper. Absolutely, man. I want to get back to what you were saying about that, again, you just kind of followed your instincts, but I want to get a couple great questions here. Here we go. Marcus wants to know, will you ever work with John Beatty for commissions again?
Oh, sure. As soon as I have time again. John was one of those guys I learned a lot from. Like I said, I didn't know a lot about comics. I'm not a trained artist in any way, shape, or form. I would describe myself as a fan who got lucky and they hired him. And so I got a front row seat I was actually so intimidated when I would go to these Batman meetings or see all these people, because I didn't come there as some kind of peer. I came there as a complete geek fan guy. And I was so intimidated by, for example, Doug Moench the first time that I felt I was going to throw up in his car because I was just so nervous. And he says, "You look green. What's wrong?" And I said, "You wrote about everything I ever loved growing up. You know, Master of Kung Fu, Moon Knight, all these things." And then when I met Denny, it was worse because let's go have lunch. And I couldn't hardly eat. I just sat there and I go, "That's Denny freaking O'Neil." So I got to ask all the questions. Denny used to not want to talk about his past too much, but I insisted. There would be time we get business out of the way, and then I said, I know you're busy, man, but 5 or 10 minutes, I just got to ask these things. And he would answer it. He would then get into it and answer it. Those were great days because I kept thinking, how lucky am I? I never saw this coming. I'm taking advantage of it because they may say, "You're out of here. Long ears are done." But I'll have these answers because I love those books and I love those years. And I just was doing what I think anyone else would have done. You know, if you get these guys alone, not in a convention situation, just sitting there having a pastrami sandwich or just a cup of coffee. And once they got talking, then they enjoid it. You know, then they weren't being interviewed or anything like that. They were just letting it go. They could say whatever they wanted. And but I was just never a nuts and bolts guy. I was just emotional. That I draw emotionally. I like to read emotionally. I think that's how we read and create art. So once they saw that, you know, I was this kid doing that, they would, you know, then they would lighten up and go, "Okay, we'll
nerd out with you."
Yeah, here's where the bodies are buried. You know?
That sounds you know, I did a Terrificon panel pre-pandemic, and it was Mike Barr, Denny, Jim Starlin, Pete Tomasi, and Tim Seeley.
Yeah,
all talking about Batman and Robin and stuff. And it was so great because at that point, and it sadly was one of Denny's last conventions, he was like, "You know, I always hated Robin. You know, this bright kid in red and green. You know, I mean, for God's sake, Batman is just making him a target." Yeah. Instead of, you know, taking the bullets himself.
Well,
and it was so great in terms of, like, you know,
right.
that kind of raw Denny.
You're right to say that because he had noticed something I'd done with my Batmobiles were one-seaters. And he used to say, you know, I noticed this thing that there's only one guy can fit in those things. I said, "Yeah, because I don't want Robin in the stories. I just want Batman." And I didn't know how he would take that. And he laughed and he says, "I agree, man. Batman's a loner." And I said, "Yeah," I said, "I have nothing, you know, Robin can go be in all the other things and be Nightwing and all that stuff. And I have no problem with that. But man, I loved just Batman on his own." And, and so Denny, you know, it was one of those things where I inadvertently Denny connected with me because I said something to him that he had noticed, and as my way to say, I don't want Robin as much as we don't need him. He can be on the phone. He can say, "I'll get information," but that's about the extent of my Robin.
What about Nightwing? Now that Dick Grayson's an adult hero, what are your thoughts on Nightwing?
You know, I think that's all cool. I mean, but again, in a separate sense, I always like my Batman on his own. You know,
yes.
There are a few times he can work with someone. I love, for example, he'd work with Deadman. That's cool because one's in the ghost world, one's in the real world. So I don't mind that kind of stuff, but it diminishes Batman to me when he's with like real superheroes because he can't do those things.
Interesting.
And so I always want him to where the other superheroes go, "Man, I never thought of that. You're right, Batman. That I never thought of that." That's his great strength is he's kind of like the Sherlock Holmes of guys in this.
Absolutely. And he's the know-it-all. I mean, and I kind of like in the cartoons that they kind of project that where it's like, you know, again, Bruce always has the right answers, but you could almost see their eyes rolling behind their masks like, yeah, Bruce, all right. You know, like, and also I always love him perched on a shelf or a ledge or like within a big room and everybody else is standing there and Bruce is in a crouch and everything, just kind of hovering just as a bat and everything.
Well, you're dealing with a guy. I always looked at Batman. Remember, he breaks every one of your civil rights, every one of your constitutional rights, every one of all of your rights. He breaks them all, and you still go to jail because he's so good at what he does. He's convinced Gordon to say, "Yeah, we don't need that Fourth Amendment. Off to the jail you go." but then again, that's why he does that. He listens, you know, and
I hear you.
he's sparse with his words to me. He doesn't go on long diatribes. It's like I said, it's like, don't do it. And that's it. That's all you got to. Regular people hear that, and I used to tell them, I think 98% of people who would really be confronted that would change their lives. The other ones who don't, that's why they're crazy and keep going to Arkham Asylum, because they don't get it. And that was the ingredients to what I would do.
Radium Theater Productions wants to know, what was your process for creating the Nightfall omnibus covers? They're very unique and sprawling. Did you revisit the run to draw those?
You know, uh, when they asked it, because I know what they mean. They're double page things, and they were actually bigger because they wanted the spine to have something on it. So what I wanted to do was capture the total flavor of Nightfall at that time, the Night Quest, Nightfall, all that stuff. So at the same time, it's that fan thing. I wanted really good shots of all these people in their character, right? So they're all scarecrows, all weird, and you know, you'd have Mr. Freeze all doing. They'd all be totally in character, and not so much maybe being involved in any kind of action on those covers, but within that the way we perceive them. And then whatever the Batman doing his Batman thing. And then I just noodled it up as much as I could, because I thought of them as it was floated at me at the time that they might make posters out of those in their
Wow.
full size. So I wanted them to work on top of that. And though they didn't do it, I think it I would stick with that, with doing those kind of covers still, because you want them, you want something like that, especially if someone's going to spend that much money on an omnibus. They should get a pretty unique piece of art that is separate from what they knew already that was being reprinted.
Understood. Oh, does the Warner Store have any lithos or anything like that of your art?
They did. I did a couple of things for them. I did a really big Batman image, kind of like you said, where he's doing his typical creepy thing. And they did it a regular one, but they also did it on canvas, which it was enormous.
Wow.
They did the the thing where I did the Bat Cave, and they did this beautiful plates on actual plates where I drawn back. Why someone would want that, I don't know.
I don't get the plate thing either, but that's fantastic. I mean, the images are always great, but it's like, on a plate? What are you,
yeah,
my
it's one of
grandmother?
the few things I could actually give to my mom, and she could understand it. It's on a
Yes.
plate, Uh, but they did those kind of things, and I was always very, very flattered or honored they would even ask me, because I am out in left field, and I do see that. I mean, not while I'm doing it. I think I'm like everybody else, but then my nose glows red, and I realize I'm not.
Dude, absolutely. Well, that's the thing. And again, there's too many heads to put on a Mount Rushmore of Batman artists. But that said, truly, Dick Sprang, Neil Adams, your style, Matt Wagner, who I think is always vastly underrated as a great Batman artist.
I think when I met Matt was around 91, 92, and I had been seeing his stuff anyway, and he had done some Batman work, and it floored me because it was completely opposite of what I did, but it was taken from the same time. He was into the 40s, I was into the 40s. And so I remember being so happy to meet him. I think it was in Detroit. And we sat and had a long talk, because he was saying the same thing to me. He says, it's completely different than what I do, yet it feels exactly the same. And we became very good friends from that time on.
It doesn't surprise me, man. I've had the pleasure of having a good acquaintanceship with Matt as well, and it's always comfortable.
Well, he gets these characters as well as anyone who's ever done it.
And he took those 8-page little stories from the early detective run and expanded them into great stories like Batman and the Monster Men and a couple of those others that really were kind of horrific.
I think he's got one of the great imaginations in comics, and I think he's one of the great writers in comics.
He's the complete package, writer and
Yep.
artist.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I wanted to point out Grant's comment, and I do have the image to throw up. He saw your Popeye
Yeah.
posted on Twitter, and you mentioned you have a dark story that you wanted to tell with the character. I'm going to throw up the image, but tell us your ideas on Popeye.
Basically, several years ago, I was asked to do a cover for it if I was interested in it, and I said yeah, but I would do it as they didn't really give any, just draw a Popeye, and I said,
Okay.
well, I have this idea for kind of a spooky or or Popeyes, and because there's a lot of horror elements in Popeye, beyond just the goons and the sea witch and all those things. It's nautical, and there's a lot of spooky stuff in that. And I grew up near an ocean when I was a kid, and so you would always hear things and see things, and oceans are beautiful, and then they're scary. And so I had done that. The good thing is they got a hold of me recently, the King's Features people said, we're thinking about that. They liked some of this stuff, so I can't go too much into it, but they are I had told him I wanted it to be a black and white book, just black and white, and kind of get into that old Fleischer feel, the old,
the
way they
black
were,
especially the black and white era. Absolutely.
But if you're going to do something different, it should be even from the surface on. I mean, I think I had thought it would have been a huge book if they had done it, because everyone knows Popeye, but that element of it, and I don't mean the way people think horror is now, but in that classic horror sense, it would be even more frightening.
I understand, man.
Yep.
And I get it. And again, I think it's a great idea. And I mean, really, that image with the goons and everything in there.
Yeah, that was me trying to sell it to them. They had just said draw Popeye, and then I did it, and it went over extremely well with them, to where they've had different people come on board, and they always see that and let me know how much they like that. Because I think again, a good idea breeds more, and I'm certain they could smell that could make money too.
Okay. Kel, I don't know where you are right now on commissions, but people are asking regarding them. Is there a way for them to contact you on your
They can get
website?
a hold of me through Twitter or through Facebook.
Okay. And that's how you spell, Kelley with an E at the end.
Yeah. Kelley Jones Art on Twitter, and just I'm Facebook's easy enough. You just type in my name.
Sure, absolutely, man. And Kelley Jones Art at Kelley Jones Art on Twitter. So that's good. Now Philip asks about the Schumacher movies, but I also want to ask you if you've seen the new movie, the Matt Reeves movie.
I thought that was terrific. I thought it was a lot of fun. Yes, it's a little long, but they kept the detective-y element to it. I think, and as far as like the Schumacher stuff went, I always felt that I didn't mind the overblown loud quality of them, but if you had done those serious with the overblown loud quality, they could have been very, very pretty cool. My only influence on it was they were taking from the comics, and they did like a lot of my exaggerated dark stuff. I know they changed Mr. Freeze, and then they started doing more stuff with the cape and things like that they were seeing. But after that, that they had their own ideas in mind. But again, the mistake always is that you target one kind of an audience, whether it be adults or children, and they just thought them as kids things. If you target an audience and just assume they're intelligent, you can pretty much do whatever you want. Just assume they're intelligent. So I think heavily idiosyncratic can work and still be connecting with all ages. And I just think they aimed at one. And look, I think that if you're going to be in a film or make a film or do something with something like a comic or horror or sci-fi, you have to do kind of what Peter Cushing says. You do it sincerely, no matter what the lines are, whatever it is, you do it like you're doing Macbeth, and people will buy it.
100%, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're right about that. I always felt that way about Adam West and Shatner.
Yeah.
I mean, again, and Adam West, it's like, yeah, he's being silly, but just being that straight, man. And
I
it's like,
dig. I'll tell you the truth. The 60s TV series has some incredibly creepy stuff in there. It's nightmare fuel. And
False
it
Face used to freak me out.
yes,
And
I think there's a lot of really terrific stuff in there. And I think upon reflection now, as we come, as years pass and you can go back to it, man, it has the vibe. And a lot of
yeah,
stuff can try that we'll get these reactions to TV comic book shows now, and everyone loves it at that moment, and then they're forgotten. But no one forgets Batman 66.
100%, man.
Yeah,
I even did you see that little video that somebody put together and they had the Matt Reeves footage, but
yeah,
they cut in Adam West and stuff.
yeah,
It's so worked. I mean, that's the great thing with the lighting
yeah.
and everything. It's like still works. I
It
mean,
still works.
he's
It
just
still
amazing.
works.
Yeah, pretty cool. Very, very cool. So, God, yeah, that's amazing. Marcus says he loaned pieces for the graphic designs book, for your Batman book.
Oh, really?
Yes,
No,
Marcus
very
Wall.
nice. That's
So
nice.
very cool, excellent. So somebody made a comment earlier, and actually, I wanted to play back when you were saying, talking about Bernie Wrightson and Frankenstein and stuff.
Yeah.
Did Bernie's Frankenstein influence your take on Deadman? Because again, it was that kind of decomposed
You know
body.
what I think hit me was when I got the job. They didn't know I wanted to do horror at DC. When I came over to DC, they just hired me as a hired gun. And so it was a coincidence that they gave it to me. And the first day I tried to draw it the way he had always been, and it just wasn't working. And I remember, I think, well, I'm stressing too much over this because I was so excited to get a horror story. And a really good one by Mike Barron. It was very different.
Wow.
And so I go to bed, I get up in the morning, and I realize I really hate it. I just looked at it and went, this is just terrible what I'm doing. So I chucked it, and I sat there, and it's like one of those things that just hits. I thought of how Alan Moore and Steve Bissette just took Swamp Thing literally and made him a walking swamp.
Yes.
And I said, well, Deadman's dead. I'll just draw him as a dead guy, and then since he's a ghost, I won't really have him be affected by earthly physics. He'll just be floating around and in weird positions, and really a desperate character, right? Just if he's connected to our world and he can't touch it, interact in it, be involved, that's got to be pretty awful, kind of wolfmanish. So I had it affect him that way. And it just sort of took its own life, or death, as it were. But it took its own life. And again, I did not know. I was so excited by that idea that I drew the first installment and I didn't show him anything. I figured, and I remember putting it in those days, you stuck it in a FedEx box and shipped it off. And I said, well, that's the end of that. They're going to say, what the hell did you do? Here's a kill fee. Thank you very much. But I didn't hear anything. That was the funny part. Nobody got back to me. They just said, here's the next script, do the next one. And it really was, at that time, Barbara Randall, now Kiesel, was the editor. And she got a hold of me about some kind of, deadline thing or whatever. And I said, hey, I'm not looking for compliments. Just what do you think? It's a different thing. What do you think? And she goes, well, it's not anything I would buy, but I can tell it's very different, and I like that it's different, and it doesn't look like everything else. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing that. I think it's for what it is. It's terrific. It stands out, and that's the best endorsement when you have an editor say it's not what I would go for, but I want you to keep doing it. That is more energetic than the editor loving everything you're doing.
I
Because
get it.
they're getting the idea. And but she was a huge supporter of it, and she got me the Prestige series that everyone got to know, and was a big supporter of that kind of a Deadman. And again, like I said later on, speaking of Bernie had said to me, when he saw it, he said that was such an obvious idea. Why had he not thought of that? And that's the only way you can compete with a Wrightson or an Adams or anybody great, is with ideas. That's it. You can't go in there and say, well, I'm going to draw like Neil. I mean, that's impossible. But you can come up with an idea, and the energy of that idea can sell people and at least give you legitimacy while you're doing it, not embarrass yourself like I would be afraid to,
I do understand, man. No, Jordan is enjoying
Yeah.
these looks at some of your classic takes on characters and stuff. People, here, Mick. Let's see, McCorgan B, or Mr. Corgan B. Pardon me,
Yeah.
Mr. Corgan B. Do you have any new projects with DC? I would love to read a John Constantine run with your art with a Lovecraft kind of style.
Well, that would be cool too. Yeah, I have a thing I'm doing for DC at this moment, with the aforementioned characters we just mentioned,
Outstanding.
and I am doing got a thing in the works with Matt Wagner, as we mentioned.
Oh,
earlier.
that's great. Oh
Yeah.
my God, I must be my ESP must be working then. That's fantastic.
So yes, things all to be announced soon, as they don't let you do it now. In the
Totally
old days,
understand.
I'd have been crowing about this stuff, but they don't let you do that anymore.
Well, I saw a cover you did for Philadelphia, and again, you'll forgive me as I roll through images to get to it. I haven't had a chance to talk to Jason Scott Alexander about the book,
Yeah.
but I have had a couple of conversations with Rodney Barnes, the writer.
Yes.
And man, that guy is such a great new voice in comics, and
Very
I'm
much
not
so.
really new. I mean, it's been a few years now, but I'm
Yeah.
so glad. And Philadelphia is such a fascinating book. And you mentioned werewolves earlier, and you had a great werewolf cover, so I'll find it. Great, and by the way, great Batman Bane right there, obviously, and some other great Batman
from the
images.
old days. Yes.
Too much, man. Was that the Batman 666?
Yes, it was.
This, of course, there you go. Some great.
Yep.
Look at that, Batman and Skulls. Really, is there and who is that in the upper left? Is that just an angry dude?
I just when I did that one, it was just to kind of announce. That's when I took over the monthly book, and I just said, okay, it's a different guy, so I'll take the slings. But
there it is.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Well, here's the Philadelphia cover.
Yeah.
And that's terrific, man. That's
I
great.
think it's a terrific book. I think it's like you said, new voices, but with a great comic book eccentricity. It feels like a comic. It doesn't feel like I'm reading a screenplay that is being, it's got all that cool stuff. So when Jason asked me to do it, it was a no-brainer.
That's outstanding, man. No,
yeah, I think he's a brilliant artist. So I was really, really honored that he asked.
And as I was flipping, well, first of all, let's talk about this, because someone said they not only love Deadman, but they love your Sandman work as well. And tell me about this particular story. And obviously, too, I loved on Twitter, you pointed out the cats are actually
all my
real cats. That's just fantastic.
All of those cats are my cats. Yeah.
Are they that creepy looking in real life? Yes. Or are they sweethearts?
Yeah, they are. I've got a house full of them. So, no, what had happened was, on that story, Dream of a Thousand Cats.
Yes.
I wasn't the first, second, third, or fourth choice for that, but none of the other artists wanted it. I had done one story before, and none of them wanted it, simply because Sandman's really not in it. In fact, he's not in it, which makes it personally as soon as they said nobody wanted it, I didn't care what it was. I said, I'll take it. And they said, well, it's all cats. Do you know how to draw cats? And I said, absolutely, I know how to draw cats. So I had to quickly learn how to draw cats. But when I spoke to Neil and he described what it was, and it was taking longer to do because he had to rethink adverbs and adjectives and all that kind of stuff, because cats aren't going to have the same references as us. So he had to write it a little differently. It took him a while. But that was fine. And when I got the story, it's a funny thing, because Sandman went from a cult book to a mainstream success with that issue, because that was the issue you could hand to people. and you didn't have to know Sandman, you didn't have to know anything. You just went, this is what it's kind of about. And man, it is it to me, I still think it's one of the great books ever, single issue of anything ever written. And I'm just glad I got to hang on, and I'm glad I'm glad that natural competition in me said, take it. I'm lucky in that, well, sadly, the first 50 scripts Neil wrote for Sandman died in his computer. It crashed and they're lost.
Wow.
And nobody thought to keep their scripts except me.
Wow.
I still have all my Sandman scripts, and it is fun to reread that occasionally. I dug it up a few years ago, and they are wonderful because there's a lot of good stuff in there that was very exciting to read, that set the tone for it. Doug Moench used to do that too, write something to kind of give you the emotion of it. So when you got to it, you could really pull from that. It's almost like acting, if anything, it's like acting.
Sure.
You get a good description or a good setup, and then when you sit to work, there's a lot of energy to it.
And you're the physical interpretation of what you're getting too. So
Yeah.
that, I mean,
Yeah.
at least you project that obviously in the
No,
art.
I think it, they're going to do a TV series. I'm as excited as anyone to see how they
The
interpret
animated
that
series.
up. Yeah.
You're giving me the opportunity to promote an episode I'm going to drop on Monday. I talked to Ed Brubaker,
Yeah.
and we talked about the latest Reckless graphic novel he did with Sean Phillips. But obviously, had to take the opportunity to talk to him because he's the story editor on this new animated series. And God, it was great. And truly, between the three of them, Bruce Timm, James Tucker, and Ed, it's like, man, you couldn't have a better group of guys
I agree.
leading the team and everything. And I'm very excited for
Pure comics too.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Philip in Poland wants you to know you're a Batman icon in Poland. Would you ever want to visit Poland sometime in late 90s?
Absolutely. I love Poland, and I love Polish food. I'm a big Bigos fan. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Chicago, we got a lot of great Polish food.
Oh yeah, you do.
So,
and when I'm there, I love it. I'm actually a big fan of Polish history. I enjoy it quite a bit.
It's something, seriously, man, you're right. I really do think it has a fascinating
if people, one of those things, people look at you funny when you say something like that, Polish history, what's that? And I go, well, if you like the Lord of the Rings, when they do the Charge of the Rohirrim, that is a real thing that happened, and it was the Polish who did it.
Wow!
Right when they freed Vienna, they had 6,000 horse, and they went and broke a siege, and that's where Tolkien got the idea.
That's amazing.
That really happened. Against overwhelming odds, these guys came in and met their obligations, and it's exactly what he took when he read that history, and that was Polish.
Something else you had done recently, and again, I'm going to scroll through the images to get to it, and that's a Jay Lee cover for something. I guess there it is.
Jay's got a fabulous friend of mine, Kelvin Mao, is working on it with him, and he showed me some of this stuff, and I thought it was just wonderful. I love Jay's work, and
sure.
And Jay's been out of it a while. So, I saw these pages and I was just like, wow, this is terrific. And then about a couple of months later, he said, would you like to do a variant cover for it? And I loved it. And so I had a blast doing it. When you do a cover for like someone like Jason or Jay Lee, you really gotta make sure you don't stink, because the interiors are so good. The interiors are so good that you cannot not give it.
You're hilarious.
All,
don't blow it, Kel. Exactly.
Yeah, it is. I'm wide open in the end zone. Don't drop the ball.
Exactly. Absolutely. So is this an original character? Is this?
Yes, it is.
Okay, because I mean, it's got a Shang-Chi vibe to it.
Yeah, it's coming. I believe Out of Image is doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. And Jay's put a lot of heart and soul in it. It looked gorgeous. It was a knockout when I saw it. I remember seeing just the first few issues he had done, and I thought, man, guy has not lost a step.
That's outstanding, man. No, I love it. All right, I'm scrolling through some more of these questions, folks. Great questions. While we are looking for questions, I will of course point out Swamp Thing.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about other people doing Swamp Thing, but of course,
Well, I would look. I was very, very honored that I got to work with Bernie on his last Frankenstein, and at the same time, I was working with Len on Swamp Thing, and I used to just pester them with questions all the time about that stuff. I mean, again, I was taking advantage of the fact that they would talk nuts and bolts, work, and that whole thing, and then I'd just say, okay, but I get to ask these questions. So I used to ask Len and Bernie about individual panels, individual things that I saw, and uh, Len wrote such great comics in the sense that the scripts were so visual and so emotional and frankly easy. I mean, you just read them and you go, God, this just, you could see it so well. It wasn't a problem. So I had great talks with Len. Len was so much fun. And he used to end all his conversations by saying, now remember, what we're doing, no matter how it turns out, it's supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be fun. Have fun. And the sad part is, obviously, him passing. But DC had told him they wanted he and I to do it a regular series with Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
And I tried to help him as much as I could, but he just towards the end he was just worn out by his illness. And but he knew he was wanted. He loved the books coming out. He was as excited as anyone when a comic it was like his first comic ever coming out. That kind of enthusiasm, you just feed on it, and it's your hero. I mean, he and Bernie were the first guys I became fans of where I knew their names and followed their work. Before, I just read comics, go play baseball, jump in a tree, go swimming, And but that's the time where I stopped after I read Swamp Thing and go, who are these guys? And then started hunting down their stuff. And it made me go from just a comic book reader to a comic book fan. And then a slave to my father to do all the chores to buy all the comic books,
Yes. I know what you mean, man. Exactly.
Is there anything else you want done, Dad? Do you want me to do anything else? Because I especially when I got to Swamp Thing, because I didn't understand, release dates and everything. I just knew you had to wait a long time between each one.
Yes.
And when it came out, you better get it because they didn't order that many, I guess, because they were all buying it. I don't know. And the Hey Kids comics racks, you had to be there. I got to know the guy at the little market to just tell me when they were coming.
Yep.
And it wasn't like now where it's always on a Wednesday or always on a Thursday, whatever. It was whenever they came in.
Absolutely, man. Now the newsstand era, absolutely.
Yeah,
man.
it was a lot more exciting, I'll tell you, because they got everything then.
And you didn't know what you were going to get, or
Didn't know.
I'm sure you were the same, because Kel and I are basically the same age, or around the same age.
Yeah.
And those Whitman bags of 3 comics,
Oh,
and as much as it was like, all right, well, there's I'm trying to even think, there's a Spider-Man on one side, there's an Avengers, and then you'd get like Where Monsters Dwell, or you'd get a Hellstrom. But the great thing was they were thrilling.
I did. I became a huge fan of Son of Satan because I found Son of Satan in that. And the absolutely mind-blowing Treasury edition started coming out then. And those big editions of stuff I wish they still did it, because
the best value for $1 ever.
Oh,
my God.
Ever. Gigantic Jack Kirby Thors. I love that.
Yes. The Galactus saga was how I was introduced to the Fantastic
Thor versus
Four.
Hercules, man.
Yes. Yeah, the Avengers with we're gonna throw down now the Yellow Jacket Vision stuff and the Avengers Treasury edition and the DC ones.
Conan, the first one with Conan and Barry Windsor, and he colored it for it. Oh my God. And I didn't know who any of these people were. That was my first introduction.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Kel, did over the years, again, because we mentioned Kaluta before, and certainly Bernie, and now we mentioned Barry and stuff, Jeff Jones, obviously. Did you get to meet those people? I mean,
I got to meet 2 of the 4, and look, it's like the Beatles.
I'm hip. Yes. The studio, for everyone who doesn't remember, those 4 guys put out a portfolio of stuff while they were making some of their best comics. And like you said, they were like the rock star artists of the 70s.
They were. I remember the absolute Dragon Dream Press put out the studio. And it was like girls put up pictures of, Elton John. I had all their posters on the wall
Outstanding.
and
Sure.
mooned over everything they did. And, any little information, buy anything. There was even a tiny scrap of anything in it. And they were kind of the star you steered by. It was like you could do comic book art and be this good and go to this elevated level. I remember spending there was a great store when I was a kid, and they knew how much I love this stuff. So they would always take the gamble and buy this stuff, the posters,
Yeah.
a look back and they had me, man. It was
Because they
like
had a
heroin.
customer.
I
Yes.
was heroin. I would come in there and I just would go, okay, I'll buy it. I would take what I had and go take advances from my dad, and then, go do whatever he told me to do, paint the house or something. But I would do it to have this stuff. The thing was, I was lucky enough to tell Bernie I did that. I said, Bernie, you got a part of down payment on a car or house came from me, man. Because I was buying. I bought the Christopher Enterprise posters. They only made 100 of those on this nice stuff, and then they did regular mass release. But I was able as a kid to get those because this one guy knew how much I loved it, and he says, "All right, I'll get them." And he didn't even make me promise. He knew he had me. He could have charged me twice as much, and I'd have done it.
Tim Bradstreet and I went to college at the same time in the same town. We were at different schools.
Yeah.
But we would see each other every week at the comic store. So we got to know each other when we were kids. And then, I got into radio. He got into comics. We met up, and he introduced me to Bernie.
Yeah.
And was so sweet about it and everything. And that was when Bernie was doing that work with Tom Jane, Bad Planet.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's when I got to meet him. And also I knew the publisher of Bad Planet. So Tom was incredibly kind to me as well.
He was one of those guys you could just walk up to. He had told me once that he had always regretted some of his behavior, and I didn't know what that meant in the early 70s. So he had become more generous that way. And I went, everything I ever heard was you were generous and nice. That's all I ever heard. What are you saying? I think what happens though is that I can't imagine. The friend I knew who ran the store actually made the trip back when they were in the studio and bought some stuff, and
wow,
it was outside of my price range and some original art.
Wow.
It was Comics and Bud Plant Distributor was the silent partner, so they could afford to get some of this stuff.
Sure.
So you go in, and there would be pages from Idol or a Barry Smith page or a Shadow page or rights and stuff, and it would just no one could afford it then. I mean, that was but we'd all go in and ooh and awe and ooh and awe.
And you'll forgive me, but with Coluto being in the studio, first art show that I saw of him, and this is about 2005, something like that, and he was at this little show in suburban Chicago, and I'm like, would you do a shadow? I go, how much would it cost to get a shadow sketch from you? He's like, how much would you like to pay me? And I didn't want to insult him, but I didn't have a ton of money, and I'm like, $60. He's like, no problem.
Yeah,
pulls out a
big. Like they'll work to the level. That's why he asked you. If you said 5,000, you'd have got a poster. You know what I mean? It's like, it's what they work to the level at that, because they put so much into it. And I don't mean just the little lines and crap. I mean the head.
Yeah. Yes.
And those guys don't redraw the same picture every time. One of my favorite times ever was I got to spend about 6 or 7 hours next to John Buscema.
Okay.
And John was doing sketches for people. It's brilliant. They were all the same guy, but he would just give a Captain America head or a Thor head or a whatever. And he was just making fun of me because here I am trying to draw all these different things. And he goes, "Kid, what are you doing? You're killing yourself." But I'd look at what he was doing. They're beautiful. I mean, but then again, he was the Michelangelo of comics. He just a perfect grasp of the human figure. And he could do these in moments. I'm like going, God, this is incredible.
Truly,
to the point where I quit doing it. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore. I just want to talk to you while you do it. And then I maybe can see he was very gestural, very gestural. And then this thing like out of marble just appeared, bang,
Yes.
it just was there. And I went, what sight, what gift? He says, no, I worked to get to this point. It didn't just happen. You're looking at 20 years to get to this point. And I went, okay, I get it. It was a lot of hard work.
Absolutely, man. No, and you're right about that. And it truly, to watch an artist evolve, but
Yeah.
it starts with knowing your craft,
Yep.
and really and getting the basics, and then and do you feel that way in terms of like you said, as you learned and everything,
I
to
just
throw
knew who
away
I
the
was.
craft and then
I was very lucky. I was very lucky as a kid. Beyond comics, I knew who I was. I knew my identity. So when I
interesting.
come to art, it's the same thing. I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what I'm into. I know exactly what I want to see. And I know my limitations, and I know the undiscovered country parts. And I work towards the undiscovered country parts. Even with my limitations, I go to that and just see what will happen,
That's fantastic. Yeah.
and that's the only thing I have to compete with the Buscema's and the Kalutas and all the rest of them. Is and compete's probably the wrong word, to just not be embarrassed to be in the same
Sure.
room. I don't know if and there's no way to know. I mean, there's no way
Yeah.
to know.
Actually,
Uh,
there is, man. It's the line that always shows up whenever you're at a convention
I
with their stuff.
look, I'm as shocked as anyone. Okay,
Come on.
no, you because I only draw in my studio. And outside of it, I'm like
That I
everybody else
understand.
doing
Yes.
everything else. I can honestly say no one on my street knows what I do. A handful of people may do, and they don't ask too much because it's
Right.
all real world stuff. But I
Right.
think what I do is then when I get into that room, I'm 12 years old now with a little more talent, and I'm all excited again. I'm not burnt out by it. I'm really excited to do it.
That's wonderful to hear. Absolutely. You know, Kelly Sudaconic, one of my favorite people in
Yeah.
comics, she always says there's famous people and then there's comic book famous people.
Uh,
And yeah, that's the thing, man. It's like, no, once you're out of the convention hall and you take the badge off, you're just another schmuck on the street.
And
Absolutely.
I will say that kind of anonymity gives you the ability to recharge your batteries,
Yes. And lead a
to
normal life.
yes, have a normal life and draw upon that. I had a period where people said, "Well, you never go to shows. You never go to shows." I said, "Well, I had two kids, and they had to be raised and go
Of
to school,
course.
and they didn't.
Of course.
They didn't even know, John. They didn't even know I did comics till they were 12 or 13.
Wow.
They
Were
had
they
no
growing
idea.
up on Batman and Superman and
I never
Spider-Man? And
talked
then
to I just never spoke about it to them. They'd
that
come
is
into
so funny.
what they call dad's room, but they didn't know I did it. They just thought, they didn't think I even had a job. So they probably thought I'm sponging off mom. And I'm just sitting here watching movies all day, listening to music with Frazetta posters everywhere.
Outstanding.
What a loser. What a loser. And one day, my kid said, my oldest son had said, "Hey, Dad, we need to go. Can we go do this?" And I said, "No, I can't right now. I've got to get this work done. The boss is waiting for it." And he goes, "Wait a minute, you got a job?" And I said, "Yeah, I got a job. I've had a job. What do you think?" I didn't even know. And he goes, and he sticks his hand out and says, shake my hand. He shook my hand. I had a job. And he runs out of the room, tells his brother, Dad's got a job.
That's fantastic.
It
So
was I was absolutely as stunned a face as ever. And I go and tell my wife, I said, they think I'm what are they telling everyone at school?
Dad's a beatnik. He just
Yeah,
sits around us.
totally.
Loser.
He's a sponge.
Now that the culture has caught up and truly, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, and again, we're the same age to really see the recognition by the mainstream of
Yeah.
all this stuff is amazing. What do your kids think now? Because
It
again,
shocked
it's
them. It absolutely shocked them. I never took him to anything. So about a year or two after that, I went to San Diego and I said, "Hey, do you guys want to go?" Because they loved video gaming and all that kind of, what kids love.
sure.
And I said, "What if you want to go? That's fine. Dad's got to work and sit there and do stuff, but you guys can go do whatever you want." And I can remember I sat down and started doing the signings and stuff like you do, and there was thankfully a lot of people there, and they were shocked. I can remember their faces just shocked. Like, they're talking to Dad and this whole thing. And that, And afterwards, they came up and they said, there's that was weird. How did I go, and you don't sound like you do. I said, no, because I'm telling you to mow the lawn and
Right, you're dead.
clean your room. This we're talking about Batman and Deadman and all that kind of stuff. That's two different worlds. So it took them a while to get that. But then they're friends. They had friends who were into it, and it shocked them. Your dad does what? I have that. That happened. So it was kind of a culture shock for them. Um,
How old are they now?
They're both one's in his early 20s, one's going to be 20.
That's great. Okay, that's true. Well, again, young adults, so that's fantastic, man.
Yep.
Wow. And again, that's the thing. I mean, now it's got to be amazing for them that, again, Kelley, and I appreciate your humility, but as you can tell from the questions we've been getting in the comments and stuff, truly, and that's why I think Bill was so excited that you were able to do this weekend with us and everything.
Yeah,
man. I mean, again, you're one of the Batman rock stars. Sorry.
Well, I do appreciate that, and it's when I took it as a monthly book.
Yes,
I took it because Doug Wildey had said a thing to me a couple years earlier.
Wow.
And he had said I'd done an Aliens and he had liked it. He didn't understand it, but he liked the art.
Interesting.
Yeah, he liked the art, and he felt like it was something he recognized. And anyway, he said, "Would you like a cup of coffee?" Oh, he died like a year after this.
Wow.
And I said, "Sure." I was just in awe. I mean, it's the guy who did Johnny Quest and all those great westerns and everything. I really admired him because he could draw 50 horses on a page and it looked great.
Yeah.
And he said to me this thing, though. He said, "You know how you get really good at doing this?" And I said, I think he's going to say, do this, that, a course, this, some kind of a tutorial like that.
Certainly.
He says, you have to do it like when you don't want to do it. And so I would recommend you, because he says, I think you have the ability, but I think you need to do a monthly or something.
Interesting.
And judge yourself by the 12th issue, not by the first. And cool. Be forced to be under pressure to come up with stuff and develop your mind, develop your ideas, develop all this stuff. And I just sort of took notes at that point. And so I was doing graphic novels and covers and miniseries. So when Denny O'Neil called and said, "Do you want to do Batman?" Doug Moench didn't want me to. He had said,
"Wow,
because we're doing these graphic novels, we're doing all these things. Don't."
Oh, sure, okay.
What are you doing? And so I didn't even review it with Doug. I just, when Denny O'Neil called and said, "Would you like to do a year on Batman?" And I said, "Yeah." I did. It didn't. Yeah. So. Then it turned into 3. It would have been 4, but it turned into 3. I learned everything on how to do this by physically doing it.
Okay.
With no one to ask. No, there was no chance to you got one day to pull your reference. If Doug asked for something, a building, a structure, a train or something, I had one day to find it because you couldn't waste your time. And that kind of pressure and fear made it happen. And I always think of Doug Wildey, who said that was going to happen. So I got to the end of the first year and I said, I kind of like this, how this is doing. And you get into the rhythm of it. You get into the routine. There would be days I had no idea what I was doing, John. Zero ideas. None. I just drew. It just had to be done. And then there'd be other days that they flew by and I didn't even know it. But Doug used to say a thing. He had just said, and when you get that page done for that day, you stop. If it only takes 20 minutes, you stop and you go on to something else. If the other day, because there's other days it's going to take 12 hours. And it's all good advice.
I get it. Yeah, please.
I think it makes artists better. I think if an artist commits himself to say, yeah, I'll do 12 issues of something, they'll be better for it at the end.
I so get it. And honestly, especially doing the work when you don't feel like doing it. Absolutely. And getting in that routine, you'll forgive the comparison, but truly in my own work as a guy who had to crank out radio commercials and stuff,
Yeah.
and they all can't be award winners.
Nope.
But you have to find that way. And like you said, there are some that you'll burn through and some will take hours. And they really work
I
kind of,
agree.
especially, yeah. So I mean, I so get what you're saying.
And
And
what
yeah,
happened was in 3 years, I had a massive body of work and a reputation.
yeah.
And I knew how to handle the fear of a encroaching deadline. I knew to get over, I had to be in the mood. There's no moods for this. It is you're being fired upon, you know.
It's deadline art.
And I
I
had to.
always say that.
You
Yes.
learned to not. You learned to tell the truth. When the editor called, "Where are you?" You told him where you were.
Okay.
You know, there's a
Yeah.
lot of guys didn't do that.
Oh
And
yeah.
I can tell you horror stories that of guys who did not do the right thing. I would always say where I was. And I can say almost every single time they went, "Wow, you're that far along. Okay, that's great."
Oh, that's fantastic.
You know, they were ready because they had been dealing with all these people who said, "Yeah, I'm on page 13" when they were on page 4.
Absolutely, man.
And so I would always say, "Well, I'm on page 12." And they go, "Oh, that's excellent. Okay. See you later, Kelley."
And you really were on page 12.
I
That's
really was
fantastic.
on page 12
That's
because
outstanding, man.
they might say, "Hey, send what you have then."
Certainly, and you could back it up. Absolutely, man.
I would dare them to. Yeah, okay, I'll send what I have, you know.
Outstanding. Good Lord.
Uh and and it was something also I didn't want to leave my inker without time.
Okay.
You know, I didn't want to abuse that because I came up as an inker. And I had the good fortune of working with Butch guys who always gave me time. I never was
Understood.
without time. That guy always give, man, it would be on a Tuesday. They would say the stuff will come and bang, there it was. And Butch used to say to me, "You deserve as much time. I'm not going to eat your time," because a lot of times a penciler would and then complain about what the inker did. Well, you can't complain if you give them no time. You get what you get.
I get it,
And
man. Yeah.
and so at that point I always appreciated it because he gave me time. I was able to stand out and have a career
I
and
love
not
it.
just be a guy who got things done.
I totally understand. We're past an hour, and I don't want to take up your time. There are a couple other questions that I
Sure,
wanted to
go
get to.
as
It's okay.
whatever you need, John. I'm fine.
You're awesome, man. Here it is. Jordan had a great point, and I wanted to hear your point of view on this. He's a fan of Kyle Hotz's art or Holtz. I never know how to
Mhm.
say it properly because it seems like your art style influenced him. And what is your take on how you've influenced other artists?
Well, first of all, Kyle's a genius,
I
and
agree with you.
he has a wicked imagination. And if there's anything we have in common is we liked maybe the same things, but he has a wicked imagination and no fear of doing whatever it takes the to make the work great. So for me, as far as influencing other artists, it's probably not so much that I would think that they would look at me and say, "Yeah, I want to do what Kelley did," because I don't know what it is I'm doing half the time. But what I think if they do take it is the risk taking to just go off and do something that my endeavor always was to, good or bad, like it or not, they knew it was me. That's all I wanted, just to know it was me.
Sure.
Um, and if there's anything I tell other artists, or if other artists tell me that, I always say it's okay to do something people don't like. It's okay to have the editor upset because you change. It's okay if you love it, and not in an honest sense, not in that sense that I like everything I can't hear, but honestly, you feel you know when you've done something that makes your heart swell. You know it, and for whatever it is, that's going to work. And if you have someone come along and an editor goes, "Yeah, but the cape's not completely right here," you go, disregard that. Just disregard it. Disregard what they said because you know it worked. If an editor comes along and says, "What would make this even better is if you do more of this, or if you do this thing here," or they clear the way for you. You It's a thin line. You keep your ears open to honest, work criticism of what makes it work, but you don't have to follow any kind of technical rule because there are no technical rules. People come into this thinking, if I can do this absolutely, the perspective or the anatomy or the whatever right, they don't care. It's not algebra where there's a right answer. What it is intuitive. It is emotional. It is whatever makes someone go ooh. Because I always say to people, when you say name a great musician, they'll name all these very technically great musicians. They don't ever mention John Lennon, who was the greatest of all in terms of how he wrote. Completely brand new, still after 50 years or whatever, it sounds like it could have it's still ahead of its time. The guy worked with complete open heart work. It was just laid it open. That's how you go about it. And whatever happens, happens. The rest I can't control. I mean, I'm shocked. As much as Denny wanting to talk to me, it's you getting a hold of me after all these years going, hey, do you want to talk about stuff you did? I'm going, really? Okay. I mean, okay, I can. Because I don't see it. I just see for that day, John, I wasn't bored. That was my big fear in life is I'll have to go be a bank teller. I apologize to bank tellers.
I was a bank teller. I know what you mean.
Okay, I was afraid of something like that. And you can be very successful in the world doing it, but my big fear would be you're going to be bored. You're just going to be bored because my mind is working in all these different ways. While I'm doing this, I'm not bored. So everything after the not being bored is gravy.
That's outstanding, man. Outstanding. McCorgan B wanted to know how the process was of doing Batman Kings of Fear. He loved the story. He loved the art.
Thank you very much. I think it's the definition of an organic tale. Scott Peterson, who used to be the assistant editor when I first came on, and hired me to do Batman Knightfall covers.
Oh, wow. Go on.
And he had this, all he wanted to do was a really good Scarecrow Batman kind of a thing. So we would talk over each issue. We didn't know where it was going to end up. We didn't have any of that. We just knew kind of here, kind of there. And I told him a thing, and I said, well, when we started it, I said, all we have to do, and we did this, I said, all we have to do is think of 6 or 7 really good moments in each issue and several really good moments in the whole thing. We'll stitch it together however it goes then. Like, wouldn't it be cool if Batman did this thing? Or wouldn't it be cool if we saw Scarecrow do that? It has no relation to the story yet. We'll stitch it together like Frankenstein. And that became a kinetic energy all the way through it.
Wow.
And I remember that I was very pleased that it sold really well because it was not a Batman anyone needed. It wasn't like it's part of something. It has this thing going on that connects to 15 other books. It was just its own thing. If you didn't want it, you weren't going to miss anything. If you thought, oh God, but if you bought it and didn't want to buy everything else, you could dig it, right?
Sure.
It gave me a chance to do a lot of the stuff that I'd always kind of had been knocking around in my head. And again, DC, bless their hearts over all the different changeovers and turnovers. They always let me just do what I want to do. They never, whether it was Denny a long time ago, Dave Wilgoss now, they just say, do your thing.
That's outstanding, man.
Yeah, it is. I'm very lucky. I think if anything, that's probably the payoff for risking being fired all these years by changing Deadman and Sandman and Batman and doing all that stuff is people begin to say, okay, he's trying, he's working hard.
That's outstanding. And forgive me if you've done Marvel work that I'm not aware of, but
I've done a little bit. I did a Venom miniseries.
Okay, that would make sense.
A lot of it was when I was working at DC. Again, my fear of boredom is it's sometimes good to have something on the side, and I was younger and I could just draw like the wind then.
Outstanding.
And so I took an Aliens thing for Dark Horse.
Yes, you mentioned, yeah, indeed.
I did an Aliens thing for them, and then I did a Venom thing for Marvel. I think I did a Magneto one too. I did my series for myself. I would do just jump around because it is good to keep it all juiced.
Sure.
And then I would return to the Batman stuff, or even while I was doing Batman, with that energy in place. Again, it's why I always tell young artists, if you can, overcommit by 20%. You can do that because that fear, you'll get it done. And once you do that, that fear and that desire, you're a 12-year-old kid again drawing comics. You keep trying to connect to that 12-year-old boy.
I get it, man. Listen, this has been terrific, and I mean, we can continue, but you've been incredibly generous with your time. Thank you, Dr. Ben. He just wanted to say thanks to Kelley for inspiring so many of us, having a great conversation here, and so many great tips that you're giving us in this conversation.
Well,
and
they're just actual practical stuff. I mean, I didn't come up with it. These things were offered to me by guys who were geniuses in it. But I want to say geniuses like this. They weren't like pie in the sky, moody artist guys who looked in the middle distance. They were blue collar workers. I mean,
yes,
very hard working men
yes,
and women. And I think what they used to do that I loved is one of the best things I ever was told, I think it was Gil Kane said, kid, get a really good coffee maker. And he says, I'm not joking. You want that thing not to break at 2 a.m.
when you need it the most. Absolutely.
When you need it better work. So you get a really good one. And I went, that's a good idea, you know? But these guys, John, when you look at their work, Gil Kane, is still electric to me. So they could poo-poo themselves and they could say, I'm a blue collar guy. And they were. But man, that thing, whatever that thing is, they were pulling it.
I get it, man. And, you know, seriously, I will never name this podcaster, but one of my fellow podcasters treats Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age creators like they're the Keebler elves. Yeah. And I'm always like, hey, man, just like you said, it's like, no, again, deadline art. And these guys, that's why they're even more amazing, because they're hitting a deadline and they got to get the job done, whether they're feeling it or not. And they are with those circumstances, making incredible art. This isn't Michelangelo on his back painting the Sistine Chapel. This is a guy who's got to get it done by 5 o'clock Friday.
Well, and I would say, you know, Michelangelo did that ceiling in only 4 years. And if you've ever seen it, you go, wow. And what did he do? What did he write about it? I always loved Michelangelo. He didn't write, yes, God visited me and I did this thing and the modes and the moods and all that. No, he went, God damn it, they're not paying me on time.
Get off your ass, Pope. Let's go.
I need my gold. Okay. So I always used to love that about him. I'd read all this stuff and I go, he doesn't say anything about his inspiration or what he did. It's just, this bastard isn't paying me on time. And I went, I instantly, he and I connected. But no, it is that thing. And let me tell you, it's wonderful. I can say that, and I am very pleased that people like what I do, but the thing I hang my hat on is I did 36 issues in 36 months of Batman and didn't miss a deadline. And kept it going and did my own thing. And all of these things that are really now I go, how did I do that? Bob Dylan was once asked, how did you write those songs? Those incredible songs. I don't know. That was a different guy. I don't know who that guy is. That's a different dude. And it is something. I think it's the virtue of just this internal fire that burns. And I try to keep it going. That's why I still work very, very hard, because I don't want to rest on anything.
I hear you.
I don't go back and look at my old work too much unless I have to for review purposes or something like that. So when I go back and look, I go, man, who was that guy? Why did he? If I was an editor, I'd have called and yelled at him. But for whatever reason, those people wanted something different, and I was doing it more than I knew. I was doing it to satisfy myself, certainly, but I didn't think of it myself that different until I looked at other people's work, and I went, "Oh my God," But it's a joy and that pleasure of hard work, and the excitement of actually building a reputation based on your heart is irreplaceable. I understand Len now and Bernie when they would talk about that. They didn't speak in terms of pride. Doug Moench was another one. They had done it, and when they would reflect upon it, there was a certain, hey, I was able to, I did this, I served it in a time of greats,
Certainly.
and I didn't embarrass myself.
No, man, these are your. I mean, I know how you feel about them and the esteem you give them and stuff, but they were your peers as far as we're concerned on the rise.
And I'll always love that you said that and appreciate it. And there's that part of me that goes, I was 12 years old in the back of my parents' station wagon reading these things, man. Never. I remember reading the Treasury edition of the Ra's al Ghul, Denny O'Neil Batman's and I remember that, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
when I'm talking to these guys, that is like, that 12-year-old was just sitting there. It's like going, why didn't I think to bring this so they could sign it?
I get it, man. No, I have my broadcaster heroes like that as well. That it's like, no, you guys are the deans, man. I'm the student at your feet. I totally get it.
And that class never ends.
Amen, Kel. Absolutely, man. No, seriously, man. Why don't we talk more often? Shame on me. Shame on me.
Yeah, shame on you.
This is my fault. It's the truth, Kel. No, we always really. I am enthralled every time.
No, I love this. Look, I love this stuff. I'm always. What's good about these things is like I said, I live in the real world, do all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
This stuff brings it all back out of me, right? And it's like sometimes, like to me, the perfect comic book was always Tales to Astonish, because I got 2 stories in a book and I could read it, and then my friends and I could all talk, and I felt like it's the same amount, but to me, I felt I was getting twice.
Sure.
But it was pure comics and pure joy and pure excitement. And, if somebody says to me something about Jack Kirby or something, I'm right back there. I'm back there. And it doesn't go away. I can, like a vampire, pass in the real world. They don't know what I am when I walk by. They don't know this is all there. Don't say Barry Smith. If I'm in the grocery store, you'll get a lecture on how great he is. But it's right there, and so these things are fun because it does bring it all back out. It never went away. It's always there.
I get it, man. No, I totally understand.
And it's the paper ones that work. It's this thing in paper, this anachronistic, silly, old-fashioned thing. Movies, TV, whatever else is out there, it's great. Nothing comes as close to that. I don't say that out of nostalgia. I don't say it out of some kind of misplaced. It's Freddie Mercury, Radio Gaga. It's still that.
Yes, and also it's its own original art form.
Yes.
And honestly, Kel, with some humility, this is why I started Word Balloon, because it's like, no, these are artists that are creating, like you said, just one of a kind storytelling that you can't find in other mediums, and that's why it's exciting. And these guys deserve their due and
John,
deserve
it's one-on-one.
The explorations.
It's a one-on-one thing. It's you alone in a room reading it, by me alone drawing it, and it was one-on-one. It isn't a big crowd. It isn't an audience. It isn't all these communal. It is just you and me, and I'm trying to tell you something. That's it. That's all it is. And that's connection. It's why if someone really loves you or really hates you, I can understand it because you're alone with them,
Right. It's a private performance.
It is. It's very private. And it's so cool. And those days where my buddies and I, we'd all go and get our comics and sit in a room, and you always hated because this guy's reading Iron Man while that one's reading, Teen Titans. Don't spoil it. Don't ruin it. But that I still have not reached that level of energy in other kinds of things. I just haven't.
No, I get it. Are you going to do any physical conventions this summer?
I'm going to
Someone asked earlier about Emerald City specifically.
Yeah, I'm going to try to, if the right offers come in at the right times where I can make it, because I am, like I said, I have a couple of things coming on. The only problem with a guy like me is summertime is when I'm doing all the October releases, because they all want me for Halloween releases.
Certainly,
So
yes.
I'm always kind of screwed for the summer, because they all say, hey, these things have to be coming in. And this summer's a good one. Like I said, getting a chance to work with Matt Wagner and getting to do this little DC thing, it's a pleasure. I mean, it's just a joy every day. And God, the same as when, this year will make 40 years I've done this.
Wow.
And you're just making me realize that. I was hired on Halloween weekend of 82.
Yeah, but Kel, the great thing is, and truly, I say this is someone just like you, that we're in our late 50s and stuff.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of 50s than it was, at least from perception. Maybe our grandparents and our parents.
No, I think you're right. No, I think you're right. I stayed very connected to all the things I loved growing up. Look, one of the things that's cool is I still have the comic books that I bought then. I still have the posters I bought then. I still have all these books and records.
Music,
I mean, from move to move to move, I have all this stuff. And if you go to normal people, they don't have anything from those years. Zero.
I get it. Yeah.
They may have a photograph of an old dog, but I have all of this stuff. And it is all this I got from the comic book store.
Stand by. I'm zooming in.
From
which one?
This here.
Oh, sure. Yes.
I got stuff. See all this. All
these man.
Things,
wow.
All that stuff. All goes back to. I've had those things for what, 30, 40 years. I've had them my whole life. Since the 70s. I've had those things. How they've maintained, I don't know, but because I love them. And I think that's true of everyone who's doing this, everyone who's listening in, we all do this. And it's what separates us.
I agree. I put Michael's comment up. He says he's been reading comics for 55 years. Yeah, man. And again, I think, Kel and I are right behind you. Yeah. And also, I think we're the oldest end of the demographic. And forgive me, Michael, and those that are older that keep those things. But yeah, like those previous generations, we're like on the old end. Now, you talk to somebody now in their 20s, in their 30s, even their 40s, and they really had a more accepting, I think, society, and also they really wanted to hang on to that stuff.
Oh, come on, John. You know that everybody in high school accepted the fact that you were coming in there with your big thing of comics to read at lunchtime. You know that. No.
no. God, I had a radio job at a sports network in the early 20s, and one of the engineers tried to shame me about loving comics, and I was like 35, and it's like, bad news, dude. I like who I am. I'm so sorry you're so insecure with your world that you got to try and taunt me with liking comics. I'm like, it's your loss, man. Whatever. And he apologized, but I'm like, no, fuck you, man. I'm like, you don't get it.
It made me immune to all the bad influences as a kid, because I didn't want to jeopardize my comic books. Right. I didn't want to jeopardize it. So all the other kids were doing, all that stupid stuff kids do. Which is probably pretty harmless by today's standard, but it was all that stuff. And there's no way, man. I was just not going to screw with the gods to get my Jack Kirby Black Panther comics. To 2001, I had to have
his comics. Yes.
And and I remember the sheer joy of that. And no, there was no acceptance then. I don't say it was like, and we were tough. It was the Wild West as far as that went.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, and I knew who I was. I loved it. I didn't care. I had no clue. I didn't care whatsoever. If someone made fun of it, I go, yeah, that's fine.
Exactly. Yes.
Hey, I remember though being very excited, and I found all those Avengers 1 through 10 then, and I still have those. So to those people who let those go, who made fun of me, I still read them, but I'll offend everyone. I still read the originals. I love
the letters. Good for you, man. I
love them.
I appreciate, and especially doing a collector show as we're doing, people that slab their books and press them and everything. And it's like, man, no, again, we're of that generation. Like, no,
that's
we read
like
our
locking
books.
A beautiful woman in a room and you can just look at her through a peephole.
It's like Mr. Freeze with his frozen wife in the comic cartoons.
There is this tactile, olfactory reaction to these things.
I'm with you.
And yes, I take care of them when I do it. I don't chuck them or anything.
Yeah,
I
sure.
do it. And I am right back there, that wonderful back room of the comic book store smell where they had the old ones and they'd let me go through and pick what I wanted.
Yes.
God, that was cool.
I'm with you, man. Oh, that's so funny. Kel, truly fantastic conversation, man, as
Thank
always.
you. This was a blast.
And hey, now you know now that I know you got the Wagner thing and the other DC thing coming up, we won't wait years for the next conversation.
Okay.
I'll be bugging you. Don't worry about it.
I will be waiting to be bugged.
Absolutely. Kelley Jones art at Kelley Jones art on Twitter, and just Kelley Jones on Facebook, or Kelley Jones art on Facebook.
Yeah, just Kelley Jones on Facebook. I'm there.
Okay. And
he'll know because it has the weird drawings. Oh
yeah. And also, again, reminding people the spelling for Kelley is right there. But great conversation, Kel, as always. Truly, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you're always willing to come back and that we have these kinds of conversations.
It was a blast, John. I had a great time.
I feel the same way, man. Everybody, thanks a lot for watching. There's going to be just under 90 minutes before the next panel, and then we got a full slate tomorrow. I will have the pleasure tomorrow of speaking to Paul Kupperberg early on Sunday afternoon about Bronze Age creators. We'll talk about Neil. We'll talk about George Perez, but we'll also talk about some other things. He has a great couple books that he just put out that collected all of his direct current interviews that he did for the DC corporate newsletter.
Yes.
And he would do these great one-on-one interviews. So we'll talk a bit about those books. And then Mike Golden's going to be on and talk about, his great time at First and all those wonderful artists that he brought with him from First to DC, making that big impact in Green Arrow and Suicide Squad and, of course, Tim Truman's Hawk World. So many great things. So great conversations tomorrow. We'll reminisce more, just like we did with Kel, but we'll also talk about some new stuff. So thanks for watching. Take care. Everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy. Kel, stay on the line. I want to talk to you a little bit.
Okay.
But everybody take care. We'll talk soon.
Hey, this is Anthony Snyder coming at you, and I'm buying, selling, and trading comic books, comic book art, and collectibles. So I'm buying any kind of collections, and I buy the whole thing. I don't cherry pick. Come and see me at my warehouse in Moonachie or my store in Leonia, New Jersey. So give me a call, let me know what you have to sell, and I'll be happy to help you. Keep calm and keep collecting. I'm Anthony Snyder.